3 days later, I sought out the families of my 2 aunts who lived in the area near the hypocenter. It was then that I saw the full devastation of the bombing of Nagasaki. Walking with my mother, we went around a small mountain. Reaching a pass, we looked down in horror. Blackened ruins spread out as far as the port of Nagasaki, some 3 kilometers away. And Uramaki Cathedral, the largest brick church in the east, had collapsed to the ground, leaving no trace. All the houses along the path down to the foot of the mountain were burnt to the ground, and corpses lay scattered around them. Many people who were badly injured or burned but still alive were left unattended, with no help whatsoever. I became almost devoid of emotion, somehow closing off my sense of humanity, and simply headed intently for my destination. I found the charred body of one aunt at the remains of her house, 400 meters from the hypercenter, along with the body of her grandson, a university student. The other aunt's house had collapsed and become a pile of wood. My grandfather was crouched down on the brink of death with severe burns all over his body. My aunt had been severely burned and died just before we arrived. We cremated her remains with our own hands. My uncle, who was initially mostly unharmed, had left the area to seek help. And we later learned that he too had collapsed at a rescue station and died after suffering from a high fever for over a week. Thus, one single atomic bomb transformed 5 of my relatives so mercilessly, taking all of their lives in one fell swoop. The deaths that I witnessed at that time could hardly be described as human deaths. There were hundreds of people suffering in agony, unable to receive any kind of medical attention. I strongly felt that even in war, such killing and maiming must never be allowed to happen. The Nagasaki bomb exploded 600 meters above the city. 50% of the energy released caused shockwaves that crushed houses. And 35% caused heat rays that severely burned people who were outside and ignited fires throughout the collapsed houses. Many people were crushed and burned to death inside their homes. The remaining 15% penetrated the human body as neutron and gamma rays, destroying it from the inside out, leading to death and causing atomic bomb sickness. By the end of that year of 1945, the death toll in the 2 cities is thought to have been approximately 140,000 in Hiroshima and 70,000 in Nagasaki. 400,000 people are estimated to have been exposed to the atomic bombs, suffering injuries and surviving exposure to radiation. The survivors, the hibakusha, were forced into silence by the occupying forces for 7 years. Furthermore, they were also abandoned by the Japanese government. Thus, they spent more than a decade after the bombings in isolation, suffering from illness and hardship in their lives, while also enduring prejudice and discrimination. The United States hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll on March 1, 1954, resulted in the exposure of Japanese fishing boats to deadly radioactive fallout, or the ashes of death. Among others, all 23 crew members of the Daigo Fukuryu-maru were exposed to radiation and developed acute radiation sickness. And the tuna that they caught were discarded. This incident triggered a nationwide petition calling for a total ban on atomic and hydrogen bombs and tests. And this spread like wildfire throughout Japan and also throughout the world. This gained over 30 million signatures, and in August 1955, the first World Conference against atomic and hydrogen bombs was held in Hiroshima. This was followed by the second conference in Nagasaki the following year. And encouraged by this movement, A-bomb survivors who participated in the World Conference formed the Japan Confederation of A and H bomb sufferers organizations Nihon Hidankyo on August 10, 1956, in the city of Nagasaki. In our founding declaration, Nihon Hidankyo expressed its determination to save humanity from its crisis through the lessons learned from our own experiences, while at the same time saving ourselves. We launched a movement demanding both the abolition of nuclear weapons and state compensation for the atomic bomb damage suffered. Our initial campaign resulted in the enactment of the A-bomb sufferers' medical care law in 1957. However, the content of the law was limited. Besides issuing atomic bomb survivor certificates and providing free medical examinations, medical expenses would be paid only for illnesses recognized as atomic bomb related by the Minister of Health and Welfare. In 1968, the law concerning special measures for A-bomb sufferers was enacted, providing several types of benefits. However, this was only as part of the social security system, and demands for state compensation remained refused. In 1985, Nihon Hidankyo conducted a nationwide survey of atomic bomb victims. This revealed that the damage inflicted on the A-bomb victims had impacted their lives, bodies, minds, and livelihoods. Their lives had been stolen. They had suffered physical and psychological scars. And they struggled to work because of illness and because of prejudice. The results of the survey strongly supported the basic demands of the A-bomb survivors, reinforcing their determination that no one in the world should again be allowed to experience the horrific suffering that they themselves had gone through. In December 1994, the law concerning relief to atomic bomb survivors, the A-bomb Survivors Relief Law, was enacted, combining the former two laws. However, no compensation was provided for the hundreds of thousands of deaths, and to this day, the Japanese government has consistently refused to provide state compensation, limiting its measures to radiation damage only. And let me repeat again, for those who lost their lives in the atomic bombs, the Japanese government has made no compensation whatsoever. This is the reality, and I wish to draw your attention to this. And for many years, these laws did not apply to A-bomb survivors living abroad, regardless of their nationality. Korean hibakusha who were exposed to the atomic bombings in Japan and returned to their home countries, as well as many hibakusha who emigrated to the United States, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, and other countries after the war suffered both from diseases unique to hibakusha and from a lack of understanding by others of the damage caused by the A-bomb. Nihon Hidankyo worked in solidarity with the associations of A-bomb survivors formed in each country, and both in law courts and through joint actions, we urged the government of Japan to act, which led to the provision of almost the same support for the A-bomb survivors abroad as those in Japan. Our movement has continued to call for the immediate elimination of nuclear weapons, urging our own government, the nuclear weapon states, and all other states to take action. In 1977, an international symposium on the damage and after effects of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was held in Japan under the auspices of NGOs associated to the United Nations. The symposium clarified the reality of the damage caused by the atomic bombings to human beings. And around this time, the threat of nuclear war was rising in Europe. Large rallies of hundreds of thousands of people took place in numerous countries, and hibakusha were asked to give testimony at these rallies. In 1978 and in 1982, nearly 40 representatives of Nihon Hidankyo participated in the UN special sessions on disarmament held at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Our representatives spoke in the General Assembly Hall and gave testimony at local schools and gatherings. Representatives of Nihon Hidankyo have also secured opportunities to speak at the review conferences of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and its preparatory committee meetings. During the review conferences, they held A-bomb exhibitions in the main lobby of the UN General Assembly Hall, and this was done to great acclaim. In 2012, at the preparatory committee for the NPT review conference, the Norwegian government proposed holding a conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. Hibakusha testimonies given at the 3 humanitarian conferences, which started in 2013, were taken very seriously and led to the negotiations toward the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. In April 2016, A-bomb survivors around the world launched the international signature campaign in support of the appeal of the hibakusha for the elimination of nuclear weapons, as proposed by Nihon Hidankyo. This campaign grew significantly, and over 13.7 million signatures were collected and submitted to the United Nations. And we are joyed that as a result of that, in part, on the 7th of July 2017, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted with the support of 122 countries. For us, this was a huge occasion for joy. It is the heartfelt desire of the hibakusha that, rather than depending on the theory of nuclear deterrence, which assumes the possession and use of nuclear weapons, we must not allow the possession of a single nuclear weapon. Please try to imagine for a moment. There are 4,000 nuclear warheads ready to be launched immediately. This means that damage hundreds or thousands of times greater than that which happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki could happen right away. And at any time, anyone here could either become a victim or a perpetrator. I therefore plead for everyone around the world to discuss together what it is that we must do to eliminate nuclear weapons and demand actions from governments to achieve this goal. The average age of the A-bomb survivors is now 85. And 10 years from now, there may only be a handful of us able to give testimony as first-hand survivors. From now on, I hope that the next generation will find ways to build on our efforts and develop the movement even further. One thing that will serve as a great resource is the existence of the No More Hibakusha project, inheriting memories of the A and H bomb sufferers. This non-profit organization has worked closely with Nippon Hidankyo to preserve records of Hibakusha, records of the Hibakusha movement, the testimonies of A-bomb survivors, as well as the activities of Hibakusha organizations in various parts of Japan. For nearly 15 years since its formation, this organization has endeavored persistently to preserve and manage an archive of the grassroots movements of Hibakusha, the testimonies and the activities of Hibakusha organizations in different localities. I hope that the association will take a major step forward in the movement to make use of these materials externally. I'm hopeful that it will become an organization that takes action, devoting its efforts to the dissemination of the reality of the atomic bombings. And furthermore, I strongly hope that it will expand its activities, not only within Japan, but also internationally. To achieve further universalization of the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and the formulation of an international convention which will abolish nuclear weapons, I urge everyone around the world to create opportunities in your own countries to listen to the testimonies of A-bomb survivors. And please feel with deep sensitivity the true inhumanity of nuclear weapons. In particular, I hope that the belief that nuclear weapons cannot and must not coexist with humanity will take firm hold among citizens of nuclear weapon states and their allies, and that this will become a force for change in the nuclear policies of their governments. Let not humanity destroy itself with nuclear weapons. Let us work together for a human society in a world free of nuclear weapons and free of wars. Thank you for your kind attention.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, I agree. Altså, det er fantastisk. Leser inne, så.